Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So happy Monday, and I got something really exciting in the mail recently, so I wanted to show you guys. So COPIC was kind enough to send me a little gift, and I thought it'd be fun to open up this big package together. So let's check out what they sent me. So upon opening right away, I see that there are some markers as well as a little greeting card, which is something I wanted to talk to you guys about today if you're interested in trying any of COPIC's products, more specifically their sketch markers. You can use my code RINSPIRIT25 for 25% off of your order, and this will make COPIC sets at some of their lowest prices, but also they have a $1 COPIC campaign going on. You can get a $1 sketch marker with free shipping, and if you participate in this promotion, you can also get 25% off of any of their marker sets. But to let you know, the marker will be in a random color. You can check out all the colors available on their website. I'll make sure to link all of their information in the description as well on the screen and in a pinned comment. Okay, so now back to this box. They actually sent me 3 sets of their COPIC sketch markers, which was actually a very big surprise. And I have a little story about one of these, but let's go ahead and quickly double check to make sure there's nothing else in this box. But I highly recommend you guys check out their campaigns and promotions going on if you were ever interested in trying out any of the COPIC marker sets, even like the ones you may see in today's video. I highly recommend you guys check it out. So besides that, let's go ahead and check out the markers that they sent. We'll do a little bit of swatching, and then we can make a quick illustration with some of the markers today. So the first set that they actually sent was the Manga Illustration 24 color set, which we'll take a closer look later. I also have the Portrait COPIC sketch set as well as their sketching grays. So starting off with our manga illustration set, there is 24 colors in this one, and I'll show you guys a better look at the colors. And there's something very interesting I will show you when we're actually doing the actual coloring phase, because with even like 24 colors, you're gonna actually get a lot of mileage out of these markers. So the funny thing about this particular sketching set though, which is the one with the grays, back in my university days, I bought my very first few COPICs during that time, and I thought it would be like the only time I would ever use COPICs. So I bought refills for them, and the ones that I bought were all these gray colors. And if you can tell, I kind of bought like all of the odd numbers. Mine is kind of like T3 and then 0, which is the colorless blender. But with the set that they sent me, I actually have pretty much the full set of the N, or like the neutral grays. So that's kind of, I don't know, it just feels weird that it filled in the gaps perfectly because now I have the even numbers. But these are actually the drawings that I did with the gray set that I ended up buying for myself back in my uni days. So there's quite a few doodles in here, and they blended really well together. So there was like a lot of like 17 and lovely fan art that I ended up doing with these COPIC sketch markers, which I really liked because I thought the gray tones, even if you just have a few, you can get a lot of mileage out of blending them, layering them, and making some fun little comics or like illustrations kind of in the grayscale format. This is like in a very old sketchbook, so I'll be sure to maybe like use these markers again in my current sketchbook or in like future illustrations so we can play around with them a little bit more. But first things first, every time I receive any kind of like new supplies or like anything that has like color range, value scale, or anything like that, we must make a color swatch sheet because I kind of need something to look at a quick glance to see how the colors look like. And I cut down a piece of the Strathmore Bristol board vellum surface paper, and it's like the one you usually see me use whenever I work with alcohol markers, and I decided to use the scrap pieces to use as my swatch cards. So I put all of my grays in one little set, and then I'm doing the skin tone, which is kind of nice that they have a skin tone set like this. I feel like if you draw a lot of characters and you already have a bunch of like colorful markers, it's nice to have like a skin tone set to kind of add to your rest of your markers, I guess, if you do have like a larger set. Then looking at the Manga Illustration 24 color set, this is kind of your color range. Now there's not like super dark colors in this particular set, but I'll make sure to take a photo of this really cool little mixing chart kind of thing that they have in a booklet in the set. So I'll put it on the screen probably around here so that you guys can kind of see, because you can actually mix quite a bit of colors just by layering up, I think, 2 or 3 colors together. But let's prep to do an illustration. So I did receive a little multi-liner that came with the gray set earlier, but it did not really react nicely with the paper that I like to use. So I am going back to defaulting to the Fineliners that I tend to use whenever I do alcohol markers, which is the Magicfly set, which is basically just a water-based marker, and it comes in a variety of colors, so I can kind of like pick a warmer color to start off, and then later on we can darken up any of the areas if we want more contrast or a little bit more focus on certain parts. So for the illustration, I ended up sketching Masaki on my iPad. So Masaki is my OC if you're not familiar, but I ended up printing it out just as a normal A4 size piece of paper. And now I'm working on the line art directly on my Bristol surface. So I'm using a light pad so that we can shine through our printer paper onto our better paper. In this case, it's like a much more smoother, thicker type of paper, and I just like the way that alcohol markers tend to blend on it, and there's not really a lot of bleed through because the paper is so thick. So kind of with our line art done, I don't really have to worry about like erasing the sketch from underneath or anything like that, so it kind of really helps to use the light pad from time to time. And this is kind of what my line art currently looks like. He has like a potted plant with tulips at the very top. And this is like a little nod, I guess, to one of my friends, because she actually likes to associate Masaki with tulips. So I don't think I've ever really drawn Masaki with tulips, so I wanted to draw this because it reminded me of her. So starting off, I wanted to test the blending capabilities right away. I didn't really do like a test run of blending on the paper, so it worried me a little bit because I don't know if there's like different formulas for alcohol markers and how well they blend. But I've always used these with like previous sets in the past, and they always worked like really nicely. So I was pretty confident that the COPIC ones would work just as nice, and I had a really nice time just using these markers. They blend so smoothly. I think also they provide very good tips in that particular little booklet, saying like certain color families as well as values really matter in terms of letting colors blend nicely together. So I tried my best to keep that in mind whenever I was blending anything that needed to be very smooth or I wanted like a really nice gradation of color. So when I was adding in some of like bluish grays into Masaki's skin tone, I made sure to pick another color that was like similar in value, but I wanted it to be warmer so that it fit his skin tone, and then have that transition and fade out into the already blended areas of like our kind of like skin color peachy beige tone. So for the entirety of the piece, I mainly focused on using the manga illustration set alongside with the skin tone set. So maybe in a future video, I'll play around with like working with the gray set, because I know someone mentioned earlier that they would like me to potentially make a cover page or the front cover of like a manga that would be for like Masaki's story, which I thought would be a very cool idea. I didn't really think about what medium I want to do it in. I know it's a suggestion because I wanted to practice more inking, so I might do it grayscale and use like the Copic markers since I have like a full set of grays now, or maybe I'll do watercolor. But if you wish to see another video where I work with just the grays, do let me know and I'll be sure to do one in the near future. So let's talk about the 24 manga illustration set a little bit more, because even though I showed you guys like the amount of colors and I've talked about the wonderful helpful tips from the booklet, I did try my best to kind of put that into use, like I mentioned, because there were some colors that I was not sure how I was gonna make for Masaki. So Masaki's hair was not really a problem because a lot of the browns and the kind of like certain kind of like skin tones kind of fit Masaki's hair color range. So a lot of the lighter beiges could work as like highlights or like the base tone for his hair, and then some of the darker colors and mid-tone color worked a little bit better for actually defining and making the correct hair color for Masaki. But the problem that I was gonna kind of face if I didn't really have the booklet or if I didn't really do any testing would be on Masaki's shirt. So if you guys are familiar with Masaki, he kind of has like a turquoise tealish color turtleneck. And looking at this chart, there was like kind of a color that kind of worked with what I wanted, but it was on the lighter side. But you can kind of see that it gives you suggestions of free colors to layer. So I went from the lightest, which is starting off with a yellow, which sometimes I forget how well alcohol markers can layer up. I think most people focus on the fact that they blend super nicely compared to, let's say, like water-based markers or like other types of mediums. But the layering capability between like a lot of these markers have been super nice. So I layered up one of the lighter blues on top of the yellow, which kind of gives the perfect color for Masaki's turtleneck. And then later on, I will be layering a slightly darker color on top to add in my shadows, which happens to be one of the darker, more purpley blues in this case, rather than one that's a little bit more towards like the cooler side of our blues. And technically, I would have taken a lot longer for me to figure out how to mix the colors properly, because I think I had the notion that like alcohol markers tend to blend nicely, and I don't really think about like, oh, let's do more, I guess, like transparent layering of different colors on top to kind of like let them mix, and you can get a full range of another set of colors basically from the 24 colors that you have. So if you end up getting this set in particular, I think it's a great set if you're like maybe beginning to use alcohol markers or you don't want to commit to a large set. Ooh, this footage is a little bit shaky. So oftentimes when I'm working traditionally, depending on which setup I'm using, my webcam is actually on the same desk surface as like my work surface. So I do apologize that occasionally it will be like very shaky, because sometimes I'm a little bit aggressive when it comes to like filling in larger areas or like trying to blend things out a little bit more. But another thing to keep in mind, like other than your color selection, because like I mentioned, even if you have like a limited color palette, it can be very fun to still like doodle or make a fun kind of, how to explain this? I think like back in my uni days, I actually only liked using the grays that I had for like certain spreads, but I would often carry around only 2 colors in my sketchbook, or along with me with my sketchbook, which was like a peach color and then an icy blue. And I loved carrying those colors around because they fit so nicely. They're low-key kind of carrot colored coded. So a lot of the doodles that I did end up doing with them was done with those 2 markers and usually like a dark blue pencil, and it looks really cute all together. But before I get too sidetracked and we talk about the drawing a little bit more, I always want to recommend that you do a test on the paper that you wish to use them on, because sometimes certain papers will absorb the ink super quickly and super well, to the point where maybe even so much like rubbing back and forth of a color won't really make them blend. Oftentimes, like a lot of alcohol markers will recommend that you should blend colors quickly so that the ink is still active and wet so that you can blend a little bit easier. But I definitely think like depending on your paper type, the amount of dry time or like leeway that you get with blending will definitely vary. So I've been really liking using this paper in particular because I find the paper dry time to be very predictable for the most part, and there's just something different about the Copic's quality that I really like, that feels like the blending is super smooth. I don't know if it's just because the color range is very easy for me to blend with, or if it's just like maybe the type of ink or something like that. I'm not too sure. These were just very enjoyable to use, and I wanted to show you guys like the full process of me working with the Copics for the tulips portion. So in the beginning for like Masaki's coloring, I did do kind of like real-time snippets, but because I won't be like moving around the paper too much, I wanted to show you guys more of the tulip coloring, because I did layer up like a light peach and then the darker peach, and then I layered up a pink, a darker pink, and then after that I ended up using a little bit of like the blue purple to make some intense shadows inside the tulip. And then I'll take the kind of like lighter, I think it's like a lighter bluish purple color to do almost like a reflective light on the bottom of some of the tulips to kind of give it more of a rounder form, which you'll see in a little bit because I don't really add it in, or I guess I'll circle it on the screen if you wish to see what I'm talking about, because I actually really like how it looks, and like I said, for some reason the colors just work so nicely together. So I think for For the most part, my favorite part of the illustration probably is the tulip portion. I did spend the majority of time just like fiddling around with colors and just kind of like letting myself be kind of like comfortable and getting used to how to use these markers in a way that I would enjoy when I was coloring Masaki at first, because I didn't really have a plan. But when it comes to the tulips, because I didn't have like a specific lighting or anything and I just colored each individual tulip as is, I just had a lot of fun just like rendering them out and then trying my best to make sure that the colors just look a little bit more harmonious together. And then the greens, I layered a few blues, a bit of the pink into some of the leaves to make the shadows look a little bit more dull. And this is kind of what it looks like with our line art and our colors kind of laid in. But if you've seen any of my other videos where I worked with alcohol markers, you would know that I like to add kind of like another pass of the line art. So oftentimes I will choose a darker color. Now this will kind of depend a little bit on the color palette, but because we started off fairly kind of like in a mid-tone-ish area for Masaki's line art, it kind of gets lost. Everything looks very soft, which I don't really mind, but I do want that little bit of like a punchiness or a bit of contrast. So I'm taking a dark blue, I believe. Sometimes I use a dark purple, but I think I'm using a dark blue today. And I'm going over a lot of the areas that have, in this case, it'll be the easiest way to describe is like corners. They kind of give it a little bit more line width, like thickness and variation, so it kind of draws your eyes and you kind of get a little bit more of that depth. But also the easiest way to think about this is like places that kind of like overlap would have a little bit of like shadow, or you might need a little bit more depth. So I end up putting it in those places most of the time, and I just kind of like scribble back and forth to make it a little bit thicker. And I don't do the dark line art everywhere. I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of having my light line art in the first place. So I do like to have a little bit of both showing if I can in the final piece. But I think every time I've done this for any of like my traditional illustrations, I think it just helps a lot in terms of letting things be balanced out. Oftentimes, I find myself like not having enough contrast in the piece, and because I like to do usually softer line art, it's nice to be able to go back in and like darken up certain parts so that things don't read as flat. Also, I guess that's another tip. If you want a little bit more dimension, other than like having more line with variation and thickness in your lines, another good thing is not to have consistent lines everywhere around your artwork. So if things are closer, you might want to have like, you know, thicker line art. If you want things to like not stand out as much, you want thinner line art. Or in this case, to kind of give it less of that weird like flat feeling or like a sticker feeling, I guess, don't put an outline all the way around your objects. Otherwise it flattens it quite a bit. Have a little bit of dimension and have some thickness in certain parts, darkness in some upper parts, and let a little bit of like a back and forth between the two kind of come through. I hope that makes sense. Maybe I'll talk about it a little bit more in a different video, but this is kind of what my finished illustration of Masaki and a little potted tulip illustration looks like, I guess. But yeah, I had a lot of fun working with this particular set along with the portrait set, and maybe next time I will end up using the sketching grays in a different video. Who knows? We'll see what I will end up using these for. It'll be fun to make like little mini comics again with these. But to kind of like take a closer look at that manual thing again in the 24 illustration set, it has a lot of cool tips and like this little blank portion that you can use to, I think, scan and then print it out so that you can do like color swatches and stuff. So highly recommend to check that out if you end up getting this set. And yeah, I think that's it for today's video. Thank you again to COPIC for sending me these markers as a gift, and I was happy to show you guys and take you guys along with me as I made this little illustration of Masaki. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!